Hello dear chess friends, my name is Kolosowski, I'm an international master from Poland, and perhaps you already know me from the courses I have recorded in cooperation with TheChessWorld.com. The course that I would like to present you is a course dedicated to defense mastery. In this course you will learn various defensive techniques. I'm going to discuss prophylaxis, active defense, passive defense, the influence of theoretical knowledge, theoretical endgame knowledge on practical decision making. In the endgames, I will show you other various aspects of defending. We are going to discuss how to determine if one is a good defending player or not. I will also try to show you some practical tips on how to approach certain types of positions so that you always get the most out of the difficult situations you face on the board, so that at the end of the day you improve as a player, you make good decisions over the board, and you save many precious points. I hope you're going to enjoy the examples I have prepared for you. At the end there's going to be a live session of me playing blitz games. I wanted to make sure that this material brought into this course is entertaining, and I hope you're going to enjoy going through the videos. Have fun! Hello dear chess friends, welcome to the first video of the course dedicated to defense mastery. Since I'm an attacking player, usually defense is not really the concept that has always been my favorite, but during the course of my career I had to well, improve my defensive skills, and hopefully I will be able to provide you with some insight and guidelines on how to defend properly and how to work on your defensive skills. For starters, I've decided to show you that sometimes if you structure your thinking properly during the course of your game, you don't even have to defend. And the first chapter, as you perhaps already saw from the outline, is actually dedicated to prophylaxis. Since you will definitely be able to find valuable material over on the internet, and also I'm sure you'll find a very good course on prophylaxis on TheChessWorld.com, then I will not dedicate too much to this topic, too much time. I'm pretty sure you will be able to improve your prophylactical skills, provided that you only express enough goodwill and find some materials. Why is it so important to know prophylaxis and how prophylaxis affects our defending, and why did I even decide to tell you that whenever you know prophylaxis you sometimes don't have to defend at all? Well, in my opinion, it's better to prevent than to cure. So in other words, if you're able to determine your opponent's ideas in advance, then sometimes you are just able to prevent them at all, and you don't have to defend because you simply prevented your opponent's ideas. And this is what prophylaxis is. Prophylaxis is determining what your opponent intends to do and preventing this. I also discussed that on a couple of occasions in my previous courses, so feel free to also to watch them and refer to that. Generally there is short-term prophylaxis and there is long-term prophylaxis. Short-term is just anticipating what opponent wants to do in the very next move, and long-term prophylaxis is well, trying to figure out what the opponent wants to do based on the general evaluation of the position, and in long run you make a series of moves or a series of decisions that should in general prevent your opponent's long-term plans, long-term goals. So I strongly encourage you to work on that area of your game, of your skills. It's definitely something to work on. It's worth working on it. And unfortunately, by many of players, especially at the lower levels of chess mastery, it's a skill which is slightly underestimated, and well, people just don't pay too much attention to this. So here's the first example after this longish introduction, which I strongly apologize for. And this is taken from the game played quite some time ago, but still I think this exercise will prove valuable. This is Simagin Petrosian. And even though, well, normally when you talk about defensive skills, prophylaxis, Petrosian is one of the first people who comes to mind. In this particular case, Petrosian was actually the person who had to deal with prophylaxis, meaning that it was Simagin who, by the way, also a very strong grandmaster, managed to find a very strong prophylactical idea. So this is the position for white, and as usual, I will try to encourage you to participate as actively as possible in this course. So already at this point, try to imagine this is a position you have to encounter in your game, and try to make the decision without my hints and without further explanations. On the other hand, well, there's nothing wrong with getting some insight. If you feel strong enough, feel free to solve it. If not, then just let's try to figure out the next move together. So first of all, we need to understand what's going on. As you see, white has the bishop pair. The play is conducted on both parts of the board, and this is quite a typical scenario for attacking on opposite wings, which I also discussed in quite detail in one of my other courses. In such situations, usually both players try to use their pawn attacks, try to use pawn storm, so that at the end of the day, the opponent's pawn structure of kingside is damaged. So black tries to play h4 followed by h3 most likely, and hopes to create some weaknesses in white's kingside position. On the other hand, white is also might be quite fast. It's still not. It's yet to be determined. White may want to be interested in a5, a6, or perhaps b4, b5. The existence of the bishop pair could prove to be useful for white as soon as the position gets open. At this point, we cannot really determine what's going to happen, although of course in long run this is always an asset to have the bishop pair. So let's imagine we're white here, and Simagin needs to face a very difficult decision. h4 is about to come, after which there is going to be h3, or besides h4 there is also g5 followed by g4, then followed by h4. So if we can only imagine white playing some ridiculous move like bishop d2, which doesn't really improve white's situation in any way, then besides h4, which is the most natural and very obvious move to make, black can also opt for g5, and after g5 you can imagine that this pawn avalanche will actually be very quick, and well, the perspective of white's pawn structure being completely demolished in just a few moves is it's not risk, it's just going to happen. So well, when you see such a thing, you don't really have time to threaten your opponent with your own ideas. It's quite clear that it is black who's going to be faster, simply because of the fact that there are pieces to be attacked on the king side, the knight and the queen. So every single move black makes will come with a tempo. That only accelerates black's plan. Black's attempt to attack the white king. The rook from d8 to g8 will come in just one move. There is already a battery along the b8 h2 diagonal. By battery, I of course mean this powerful queen and bishop. So they make actually a very nice pressure along this diagonal, and of course, all in all, we can say that black is a bit better. Or black would be a little bit better if it wasn't for Simagin's next move. So, as we already determined what black intends to do, its short-term prophylaxis is just one move, attempting to prevent opponent's ideas. For those of you who feel strong enough, feel free to pause the video, find the move on your own. And for those of you who still learn and try to master their skills as regards prophylaxis, well, as I said, black's two ideas are h4 and g5. So the logical move, well, from that perspective, is the move that Simagin played, h4. I would say it's a double exclamation point, because normally, well, we are taught to not to make a move on the part of the board where we are weaker. Besides that, there is also that aspect that well, h4 in theory will only provide black with yet another hook, meaning that as soon as black manages to play g5, well, the position on kingside will just be open. Still, this outweighs the fact that g5 is prevented and h4 is also prevented, at least for the time being. This outweighs the risks associated with black getting g-file open. It just slows down black enough and provides white with some additional resources, and therefore this is a very strong move. Additionally, as I mentioned, queen and on c7 and the bishop on d6 cooperate very well. If we remove the potential target on that diagonal, so of course the h2 pawn, then we have a free hand to move the knight, for instance, to e4, and in general we are more flexible in terms of our defensive resources. So after h4, Petrosian went knight 4 to d5, probably not feeling comfortable with the knight on f4, especially that white's next move could have been c4. Sorry, c4. So, for example, if black went rook d8, rook g8, then c4 could be played, and all of a sudden there is not enough space for all of the pieces on that h to b8 diagonal. Knight g6, as suggested by the engine, could be played, but then bishop g5, or even perhaps in some positions c5 could work quite well for white. So perhaps Petrosian didn't feel right about this. He went knight d5, and after knight d5 the picture is already quite different, because the bishop on c1 gets involved in the game without even white making a single move with this piece. It controls g5 square, and well, in general this changes the situation quite extensively. G5 is already a nice outpost, so is the g4 square, but at this point knight g4 doesn't really give black anything. For the time being, knight e4 was played, just removing the knight from e4. Bishop h2 is just a single check, so you should never be afraid of such a move. In my opinion, both king f1 and king h1, perhaps king h1 looks a bit more natural, but both of these moves should be decent. So after knight e4, offering an exchange of the bishop on d6 for the knight on e4, which is of course not acceptable from black's perspective. In case of bishop e7, there are always these unpleasant tricks like knight g5 or c4. So Petrosian couldn't really afford that. He went knight e4. Knight e4, bishop e4, knight f6. Of course, again, white cannot really, well, he can, but he doesn't want to allow an exchange of the knight for the bishop. Not bishop g5, bishop c2 is better. Just escaping with the bishop. There was knight g4. not really threatening anything particular, but just escaping from f6 and potential pin along h4 d8 diagonal in case of knight g5, of bishop g5. There was g3, a prophylactic move, rook h to e8, a5, so white tries to take over the initiative, e5, bishop g5, f6, bishop d2, ed4, cd4. And what changed is, well, first of all, the initiative clearly switched to white. The attack on king side is just not anymore. G3 move nicely neutralized black's pressure along this h to b8 diagonal. Of course, black also consolidated. He has two rooks on central files. Structurally speaking, well, it's not an easy situation to evaluate. So white definitely has an isolated central pawn, which is not really what you want to get, especially when the position is getting simplified. On the other hand, h5 pawn is not that strong. But to my mind, the most important aspect, well, there are two actually. First of all, as I said, the initiative is on white's side, so a6 or b4 followed by b5 or any other idea trying to open the queen side will take place in a moment. And moreover, there is a bishop pair, and as the position got open, I don't feel that the pawn structure will be that relevant in this case. So as you see, the smart engine suggests that black plays bishop e5, which didn't really happen, and I'm not really sure if bishop e5 is that great, because after bishop e5, to me it seems that bishop g6 might just be a bit faster, although bishop e5 is a cunning approach, so that is something I'm not sure if Petrosian even considered. It looks tempting, might look tempting, but there was rook e1, followed by c5. The point behind c5, well, the move itself is double-sided. On one hand, black attempts to create a nice blockading idea with d5, bishop e5. It's not strictly a blockade, but as you see, black's pieces get very decent spots in the center. In particular, there's e5 square, but also you can just very easily imagine black just attempting to put the bishop on d4, putting pressure on f2, plus, in case that's neutralized, for instance, there is still bishop f4 to be considered. Black has knight e5, so those two squares should provide black with decent play, in my opinion. Plus, it's not so clear whether the pawn on d5 is actually a passer or just an isolated pawn. So after c5, of course, d takes c5 runs into bishop c5, then bishop f4, followed by bishop d6. Black might be just on time to equalize, or to, if not equalize, then get a decent position. In the game there was a6, which is a very interesting attempt to sharpen the game. Of course, in case of a b takes a6, then white's domination on light squares should be the most relevant factor, because after queen d5 we can easily imagine bishop e4 coming, and bishop e5 I don't believe is that strong, although tactically it might work. Bishop e5, queen b3, queen b7. If queen b7 straight away, then this endgame should always be a bit better for white, due to better piece coordination, plus the surplus pawn on a6 is worth pretty much nothing. So I'm more than certain that the bishop pair is the factor that outweighs the slight material deficit. In any case, after a6, Petrosian faced a very difficult decision, and eventually he went c takes d4. Which itself is not a bad idea, because it's, as I said, a6 is a cunning approach, interesting, not necessarily strong. After cd4, there was bishop a5, of course queen a5 runs into queen b7, you don't want to make a move like that, b6, bishop d2, again queen c2 doesn't work, and what actually white achieved by forcing this b6 move? Well, clearly as soon as the black queen leaves a square from which it controls b7, then there's going to be checkmate on b7. Plus, there's a whole cornucopia of ideas associated with the pressure along h to b8 diagonal from white's perspective this time. So, well, we can easily imagine black's bishop somehow evaporating from the board, and then there's bishop f4, which might be unpleasant. Plus, if only white manages to transfer the bishop behind the queen, so in this case it would be g2 or h1, then queen a8 will be checkmate. So black had to play very precisely and quickly. Knight e5, queen g2, d3, bishop a4. Well, black is up a pawn. Black still has everything pretty much in control, but you still cannot feel that safe. There was bishop c5, rook c1, queen f7, and here I think this is the decisive mistake, even though it's not that clear why. Of course, b4 was a threat. The point is that queen f7 will run into a move with a tempo, bishop b3, in a moment, and it was a bit better to play queen e7 probably. You will see detailed analysis in the final. For the moment, I think it's enough to say that queen f7 was probably not the most precise move. Bishop b3, queen e7, bishop f4, and as you see, well, white is down a pawn, but well, there is a domination on light squares. Bishop f4 is an extremely annoying piece. g5 is the suggestion, and this really should be considered at least. Well, I already believe white is doing a bit better, because simply from practical viewpoint, it's always easier to attack than to defend. And as you see, thanks to this prophylaxis first, the initiative totally switched, and from Simagin being the defending player, move by move he managed to create some counter ideas, and here it's quite clear that it is Petrosian who's underwater. b5, queen c6, very strong move. The queen comes very close to the black king. I think this is something that Petrosian missed, and he should have played the g5 instead. Queen c6 is not only about queen takes b5, but also, well, bishop d5 becomes a threat now because, well, then both queen c8 and queen a8 are checkmate motives, so it doesn't look that great for black. Queen d7, queen e4, rook e8, rook d1, so, well, the game is still going to be played for a few moves. Bishop b6, rook takes d3, so, well, as you probably imagine, once white took back the pawn, then there is pretty much nothing for black to hope for. Bishop f7, rook e7, bishop h5, now bishop f3 is a massive threat, queen c4, queen h7. Now black needs to be aware of ideas from the other part of the board, so queen h8 or queen g8 might be a problem. So king c7, rook d2, now rook c2 is a threat, queen b4, queen g8, so black is really surrounded by enemy's pieces. Queen d8 is a threat, rook d7, rook c2 check, bishop c5, queen a8, bishop e3 was not a good move because of queen b1, obviously. Here if queen b1, then there's just king g2, queen c2, no, queen b1, rook c1, sorry, of course, queen b1, rook c1. So there was king d6, rook d2 check, bishop d4, bishop e3, pressure everywhere. Black went king e6, but this was met with queen e8, king f5, so the king goes for a walk, g4, king e4, queen a8 again, and it looks like a very funny situation. In just a couple of moves, the king was lured as far as e4, and after rook d5, the final move of the game was rook takes d4, of course. Right, so as I said a couple of moves ago, when the game was already, if not determined, then at least it was quite clear that the defensive task was, well, far from being pleasant. Thanks to this h4 move, which could have looked counterintuitive on one side, because, as said, we are told when learning how to attack on the opposite wings that you should not really touch your pieces, because this will only accelerate your opponent's attack. But when you, well, as you learn chess, as your level increases, you know that in chess, for every single rule there is at least one exception. And well, finding exceptions to some rules actually is a sign of quality of a chess player. So when you manage to justify a move which is not really according to principles, so to speak, then it shows that your level of understanding is just above average. And this is the case. This was the case of Simagin Petrosyan. h4, as I said, double exclamation point. To my mind, the beauty in this case was in simplicity. Just by this making this one move, the initiative totally switched to white, and after that the game was pretty much straightforward. Okay, so thanks for watching this introductory clip, and in the following videos you will see a bit of Prophylaxis, but since it's not the most relevant point of this course, we will swiftly move to the core of this course, and you will see some proper defensive exercises and examples. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.